Welcome to the Agile Career Podcast, where we will take you on the journey from employed for life to employable for life. We'll give you the tips, insights, and strategies to help you build the transferable skills that you'll need. So let's get started. Please welcome your host, Gunther Richter.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the next episode of the Agile Career Podcast. So today, it'll be no surprise that I want to talk about career transitions again, and also transferable skills, building transferable skills and recognizing transferable skills. So today's guest is someone who has had a very stable career, but at the same time has made some very big changes in that career, which is often different from people going through many changes in their career, which are incremental rather than big. So to share a story with us, I'd like to welcome Anita Toth to the show, who joins us from Canada today. So welcome to the show, Anita.
Thank you so much, Gunther. I'm happy to be here. And specifically, since Canada is such a big country, one of the first questions I get asked is where in Canada? So I'm just outside Toronto.
Brilliant. My son will love that. He's a huge Maple Leafs fan. So
Nice.
Perhaps I'll get him to listen to this episode. So that might be the draw card. All right, brilliant. Well, as I said, welcome to the show. Before we get into some of the nitty gritty, do you want to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and tell the audience, what it is you currently do?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I currently do, I call myself a chief churn crusher. I believe I'm the only one in the world by such title. And I help B2B or business to business SaaS companies. So SaaS is software as a service. So Netflix is a great example of a SaaS company, something that you pay a monthly subscription for that particular piece of software. And I help them retain their customers longer. So that's specifically what I do.
And that's quite interesting, because one of the themes that emerges through the number of interviews I do in this podcast, and especially talking to people that do work in higher education, is often a statement that when you are at university or college or, whatever it is you're studying, often you're studying for a job that doesn't exist. And going back, I guess, to university, and we'll get into that a little bit, certainly the job you described or the role you described, SaaS companies didn't even exist, so I think that's really interesting, and it's something that is fairly new, I guess, and wasn't even thought of then. So I guess going back to the start then and thinking about the end of school and making your way into post school or your sort of undergraduate, what was your view then on a career? What were your thoughts?
So actually, my thoughts were to stay in academia and go through. I got my honors bachelor degree in geography, which is, one of those disciplines that people are like, what? I took that in grade school. They teach that in university. Yes, folks, they do. And I got into something that really fascinated me, and it was around how built environments affect human health. So we called it medical geography. We also looked at, not just the diseases themselves, but why is it the people weren't compliant, and how social and cultural influences affected the spread of diseases. And I thought this was amazing. So I wanted to take it at a graduate level. I did, got my master's degree in this. And then I started a PhD and realized I don't want to do 5 years of my life dedicated to this. At that point, I had already done 7 years of advanced study. And so I landed a job like the very next day after I graduated as a research assistant in a research institute at the university. And so I just sort of fell into it. It wasn't planned. And that's kind of how now looking back, we're having this conversation. That's how a lot of my jobs or interests happen, is I would just be kind of toddling along, and then poof, I'd fall into something. I'd be like, oh, this is really cool. Let's see what I can do here.
It happens so often, especially if you're studying and you're doing a part-time job, often that morphs into a full-time job. We talk often about the power of networking. This is how these opportunities come up, and, being able to spot these opportunities. But I guess, up front, it was quite a big commitment saying you were going to do your undergrad time at university. then specialize a little more and do your postgrad. That was quite a big commitment, and I guess it was quite a niche area of study. We talked a bit about it before we started the interview, but what did you see then as being your job opportunities before realizing there was an opportunity at the university as the research coordinator?
I thought professor was it. I really did. I thought that would be the pinnacle. I was very much driven. So right from my early days in undergrad, that first year or whatever, the dream was always higher education. I wanted an advanced degree. So, and once you get in, it's interesting because once you get in the system, if they recognize that, you might be good material, shall we say, to stay at the university, they really put a lot of effort in getting you to stay. So it became, that's all I could see. I wasn't sure what I could do outside of it. Although some of the postdoctoral fellows, they went on. So these are people who have their PhDs and then they do schooling after that. Started working for like Health Canada and public health agencies. And yeah, I thought that was interesting for a while, but really didn't appeal. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then I got this job as a research assistant, which ironically put me in the health department. That's where I worked. We did all sorts of really cool studies, and I really enjoyed what I was doing. So it kind of like ended up that I was still in the world a foot in academia, but also out in the working world as well. And it was an amazing experience for many years.
I suppose it's perhaps less of a shocking transition than, compared to people who, leave university and into the working world in a corporate environment, perhaps working for one of the big consultancies. But what was that transition like? It obviously wasn't just like taking another degree. It was, there were some challenges, I'm sure.
It was really hard because I was placed in a very established department. So it's public health. And I specifically worked with the public health inspectors. So public health inspection has been 100 some odd years it's been around. And so I needed to learn their culture. The other thing was I was just a transplant. So I was working for the university, but my actual physical location 4 days a week was in public health. So I had this little desk and trying to understand how I could serve these people when I wasn't trained to be a public health inspector. Half of the time they'd be talking about stuff I had no idea about. It was really overwhelming, and especially the cultural shift. I really needed to understand how differently a government organization like that worked versus an academic one that I was so used to. What are the politics and the confines of that? So it was weird. So I wore two hats. I'd work, 1 or 2 days a week at the university and in an office there. And then the other days I'd be right with the public health inspectors listening to, the blood, guts, and gore of whatever they came across that day and policy changes and how it affected them.
And thinking when you were into that environment where you said there was a bit of a culture change or a big culture change, how did you highlight the sort of gaps, whether it was the terminology that was used, the working environment, how did you highlight and sort of close those gaps in your skills?
I found somebody who was willing essentially to take me under their wing and mentor me. And that was the difference. She had been a public health inspector by that point, nearly 30 years. And she realized how lost I was. Versus the other ones were so busy in what they're doing. They just thought I was a public health inspector too. But she realized how much I was struggling. She took me under her wing, and that was extremely helpful. In fact, it has now been 20 plus years, and her and I are still in touch. We get together about once a year, twice a year, and we go for lunch and we catch up. Like that's how much she impacted my life.
That's an awesome story. And I think there's so many examples of people that have grown and really benefited from having a relationship with a strong mentor. And I think often people are perhaps a little bit reticent to ask people for help, other people for help, and not actually realizing that so many times, people would be mentors often say yes.
Right.
I guess, as you say, it was very generous of her to offer up her time and take you under her wing. So it's a
She
great piece of
did.
advice.
And I was going to say, now that you're taking me back to those times, like she invited me to go for coffee with them when they'd all go on break. Like they all had to come into the office in the morning. They would have their meetings, then they'd all have a break together, and then they go out into the field and do their work, right? Because they all had their different districts that they worked in. And she was the one who invited me, because otherwise I would have just sat by myself, because everybody had their groups. They'd worked together for years. And so she realized that I would have just been sitting by myself alone in the office. And that's how the mentorship started. It was nothing formal. She didn't say like, hey, kid, by the way, I'm going to take you under my wing and this is what we're going to do. But she kind of did. Hey, why don't you come with us? And she started inviting me out more and more often. And then through those discussions at coffee, I could ask those questions that then put the pieces together for me, because I was overwhelmed. I was way in over my head. I had no idea what was going on. And there was no training. It was a brand new position. It was the first time the university and public health were created this position to kind of embed somebody within the public health department. So I was lost. I was really lost.
It's a really good observation. Often when we're sitting in class, and also casting my mind back, it's a while ago now, but you learn things and you think, what is the relevance of this? When will I ever need this skill or this knowledge? And then you flip it on its head, and you're in the working environment, and you think, oh, I don't know this stuff. How am I going to get this stuff done? How am I going to get through? And it's so interesting as you describe it, trying to reconcile those pieces and then understanding how they all fit together. So I think, taking on, not taking on, but having a mentor take you on is a great piece of advice. And the fact that
so
you're
grateful.
Still in touch today is super.
Yep. So grateful for it. I don't think I would have, I don't know what would have happened, but I'll tell you one thing. My second day on the job there was September 11th, 2001.
Oh, wow.
That was my second day on the job. So I came into work and it was this crazy flurry of activity. I didn't understand what was going on. And the city I live in was, because the US closed all flights, so planes had to be diverted to Canada. And some of the planes were being diverted to the city I was living in. So public health had to be involved very quickly and look for hotels and make sure that they had all the standards that they needed to accommodate. I think we took something like 800 people into the city that, very quickly. It was nuts. So that was my second day on the job.
It really is a sort of trial by fire kind of thing.
It's crazy.
Be thrown into the deep end. But obviously it worked for you. It was enjoyable. You stayed in that role or at the university for a number of years. I think it was around 15 years or so.
It was actually, 16 years with 2 maternity leaves, which are a year long. So actually working time was 14, but I did change. You talked about incremental change. So within that institute, I went from a research assistant to a project manager to a research coordinator. So the change wasn't much. It was really just my tasks were really what changed during that period. But over that, over those 14 years, I did change jobs 3 times within the same institute.
And thinking about that progression or that transition through those jobs, and I guess looking back now and perhaps being more conscious about it, what were the sorts of skills that you took with you through those roles at the university?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think one of the biggest always is around communication. And because I could communicate both in written and verbal form, it seemed to do very well for me. The other was project management, and I had to learn this. I didn't know how to do project management besides the skills I learned on how to manage so many projects when you're in school. Right? You've got this paper due, you've got this thing due, you got the exams, and you're juggling all of this. Really, it's project management. How do I get this project and this project and this project or more, 5, 6, 10 of them all at once? How do I make sure that they're all finished on time, but also well? Right? That was always the goal. So undergrad taught me about project management. And then I got into this job, and the same public health department came a knocking and said, hey, we have this conference, which is an air quality conference, 2 days, international. We have the person who would normally run this. We have nobody in that position. So can Anita do it for us? And so I had 8 months. I've never built, like a project that big was crazy. I didn't have time to go through formal project management. But what I did is relied on those skills that I developed as an undergrad and in my master's of having so many deadlines and all the pieces. And I learned very quickly what project management was. Back then, there wasn't the software there is today. So it was big, huge whiteboards with all kind of little Post-it notes of every single task that needed to be accomplished. And that was one of those big skills that, again, it's obviously transferable. It was never anything I formally took in terms of schooling, but it became a massive asset in that job.
Yeah, and thinking about when you were completing your degrees, you weren't consciously saying, I'm managing these as projects.
No.
Those were skills that were, I guess, implicitly developing or subconsciously developing. And it's only when you sit at that point and look back and say, hang on a second, how have I done this in the past? What can I use to take me through this, organizing this conference now?
Right. And that's exactly what it was. The conference was huge. I ended up growing the conference by 30%. They'd never had anybody do so well at it. And I know it was directly related to those skills that I brought, all those project management skills that I brought into the position. And, it was the one and only time I did it. But wow, did it really show me that I'm more capable of doing things than I initially thought I was.
That's a great bit of insight. Often I think many people lack the confidence in themselves and, will shy away from certain opportunities. And it's really great that you've highlighted that, saying, well,
I got told this is my job. There was no shying away. My boss just volunteered me. Anita will do it. Oh my God, I don't even know what I've never even heard of this conference. And I had to do everything. It was ready for a rebrand. It was, and that's how I learned to communicate and the power of clarity. So just be very clear on what you're looking for, what your goal is, and who has the information you need to get that accomplished. And that is the one key thing that I took out of that experience, which has very much, again, come in handy moving forward with my career, is learning how to communicate and bringing it right down to those very clear levels. What is it that I need to do? What am I looking to accomplish? And who has the information I need to get that done?
Yeah, it's project management in a nutshell.
Yep.
And so that's a great description. So then thinking about those or kind of those skills that you developed through the years at university,
Mm-hmm.
the job or the various roles were really enjoyable, but there came a time.
There came a time, but I'm going to just back up a tiny bit and say, always had side hustles. Always had side hustles. So I think there were a couple of them, and none of them went anywhere. These were all things that I was just trying on the side. The most successful, surprisingly, was selling my friend's honey. So he's a beekeeper. He was sitting on over at that time 2,000 pounds of honey. He just couldn't sell it because he's on a farm. He's busy taking care of the farm. And it just started with me, saying to one person like, hey, I just tried this honey and, can you get me, being in Canada, a kilogram? So he get me a kilo of honey. Sure. And then next thing I know, I'm asking him like, can I have 2 cases? Can I have 10 cases? At times there were 25 cases of how many? 12 jars. So 12 kilos times 20 cases in my basement. And I'm hustling it through the office. My boss didn't care. He was totally okay with it. But then I started getting bigger businesses and I realized like, holy crap, I can sell. I didn't know I could do this. And that's when I started to think like, maybe these little side hustles I have could maybe translate into something later on. Like I really enjoyed the process of it. So, and then I started selling eggs out of the office. Some of his farm fresh eggs. And that was kind of the limit. I was like, I don't really want to be doing the eggs. But the honey was like, it was crazy how much I sold. And I had a lot of fun doing it. And I helped him.
Well, I'm really glad you brought up side hustles because, and you used the example of learning a new skill or I guess highlighting a skill that you had and you got to use, which was selling.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I can't recommend side hustles enough because you do learn things that you might not in your day-to-day job.
Right. I didn't sell in my job. It's not what I did. Like the biggest thing we did was submit grants. And again, the project management piece, when I'd have sometimes 10 grants all going in for the exact same competition date, there was no selling involved. And I liked this, because it helped my friend out, brought me a little bit of money. But the bigger thing is I got to really work with people. Whereas in my job, I didn't really work with people. I worked with a handful of professors, but I didn't get to interact in the same way and learn about a lot of people like I would normally like to do. So that side hustle afforded me that opportunity. I had another one that failed where I was going to make these signs that go on the back of, because I was transporting my kids at the time in a little trailer, pulling it on my bicycle, and just a little sign that's on the back that said, like, there's not groceries in here, there's kids in here. So please be careful when you're driving by me, because they're right at bumper height, right? They're very low to the ground. But I tried all sorts of things and looked into it, and that went nowhere. So these side hustles, what they were, and now I can see it, they were experiments, and they were low risk. So like maybe $100, $200, right? My time was the biggest portion of it, but it allowed me to safely play because I had my job to bring in that steady income. So the risk was really low, and very grateful that I had these different things.
And I'm glad you mentioned risk. So it kind of draws on the skills that you develop as a project manager, but there's often a perception that entrepreneurs or business owners are very tolerant, if the right word, sorry, of risk, whereas they probably are more risk averse than most people, but they know how to manage the risk correctly.
You've got it. Or risk in certain areas, right? Like I am one of these people. I like to try new things. It's always been my personality. And I'll tell you about one job. So this was a side hustle that became almost full-time several years ago. And I call it my 4-month, $30,000 MBA. I'm not going to tell you that I soaked $30,000 in 4 months in a losing business. So I reframed it because it really taught me all of those things I needed to learn about marketing and sales. And what it was a custom shoe printing business. So I'm still selling the honey, but that's just, $100, $200 a month. It wasn't big. And then a friend of mine and his wife bought this custom shoe printing business. So really it was on like the Converse high tops, and they had a digital printer so you could print anything you wanted. And they were really struggling. So I had some time on my hands. I was kind of curious about it. So I got more and more involved in the business. They had no idea who their ideal customers were. They had these folks were clueless. And I started to learn. And I was like, okay, well, what about this? And what about that? And the next thing I know, they said, well, do you want to come into the business as a partner? I'll tell you, folks, if you're going to come in a business as a partner, an existing business as a partner, make sure you look at the books first, because that was one part I don't know, I just took it on faith. Dumb. And they were hemorrhaging money, which is why they wanted me to come on. So I learned how to create websites. I'd never used WordPress before. I had never, there were so many things I learned about how to hire. One of my first hires was my nephew. And 2 weeks later, he was my very first fire.
So it's the danger of hiring friends and family.
Oh, he was horrible. He was terrible. What a horrible employee he was. But I didn't know, and I was learning, and I was eager. And so that became very different, though, than these side hustles. Even though it was a side hustle, now it became a full-time job. When you're soaking $30,000 into a business versus a couple $100, the risk is very different. And we ended up getting some big accounts, but we couldn't fulfill. So the business imploded. No surprise. And that's when I really learned. It's interesting because my friend and his wife walked away from the business and said, "Oh my God, we'll never go into business again." I walked away and went, "Oh my God, look at what I can do.
I'll have more of this.
I like this." Like, it was exciting to me. And so that's why I called in my 4-month, $30,000 MBA. I learned so there's a bunch of things I didn't learn that a formal MBA probably teaches, but it was on the ground training, and I still had my job. So again, there was that safety of having my job, knowing I had that income. But wow, I didn't know you could burn through money that fast. It was just like a pit. Like, we just couldn't feed it fast enough for how much it was hemorrhaging money.
Yeah, that's an eye opener, and I think it's a good word of advice. Saying look at the books if you go into an existing
Look at
business,
those books.
and even going into a new business. Think about your business plan and that sort of thing. So I think there's
Right.
a really really sage advice there about thinking those things out carefully. The interesting thing you said was, when you started spending time with who were now or then your new business partners, they had no idea who their ideal customer was, and
Nope.
looking at the role that you do now, or looking at your business now, that's one of the key skills you've obviously taken through from
Now you know
that,
where it came from.
business. Yeah, it's it all hangs together so well.
Yeah, it's exactly where it came from. So it was probably, what was it? 7 months. 7 months after that business closed, I got the old, "Anita, can you come and meet me in my office?" And I was like, "Oh no, this ain't good," because I'd known things weren't good in the institute. The research environment across Canada at that time had changed. So we had been previously getting like 30% of our research projects funded, and now we were less than 5%. So I knew, like, the day was coming. I just didn't know when it was coming. And 7 months after that business closed, I got the 2-minute conversation. "Thank you very much. We're giving you this many weeks," and because we were a unionized environment. So I had, I think, 1 week for every year of service. So 14 weeks to find another job. And I applied for 27 jobs over those 14 weeks.
Wow.
I could not. And it's just, again, how the university works. Again, I was very specialized in what I did, and I worked in the research side. So someone has another job title. There was the exact same job title, all the same tasks that I do, but it was in transfusion medicine. Well, I've written 25 papers or articles and peer-reviewed articles in my field. I don't know anything about transfusion medicine. So I can't even apply for that job because it would take years to get subject matter expertise. So I was like, okay, I can't find a job. I guess this is, the opportunity knocking. So I looked online, and there was this whole movement of, kill your 9 to 5 or whatever it was. And I jumped into that. What was it? 20 days before my very last day at the university. And I started my brand new career.
And in terms of, I guess, understanding what that new career was going to look like,
yeah, no understanding. I think it's for the best. I had no idea what I was getting into.
But there must have been something that you drew on, saying, well, okay, these are the skills I've developed. These are the things I can do well. Mm-hmm. Okay, transfusion medicine, I can't do. So obviously that's why I couldn't apply for that job. But there were these skills that you developed through your time at the university, through your side hustle or number of side hustles. There must have been something you said, okay, well, let me package these together, and I think I can do this thing.
It wasn't like that at all. Not at all. Mm. Do you know what it was? I know I enjoyed having that business, and I want an online business. Let's see what I can do. That's about as far as it went. Like, there was no real planning of it. And that's when I came across this 9 to 5, kill your job, get rid of your job, become your own entrepreneur kind of thing. And I found this one particular program, and what they did for a very heavy price, now that I look back, they take you through and they taught you how it was all around lead generation and how to rank websites better than the, so that you could sell the leads from those sites to, businesses at the bottom of page 1 or page 2 of Google. So they actually provided the entire business model to you.
Okay, and similar to, I guess, a franchise in a sense, almost.
Yeah.
Here's the business model. Here's the training.
That's right.
We're going to show you how to do it.
Step by step, we'll take you through. This is how you do it. This is how you set this up. This is how you, whatever. Yep, that's exactly what it was. A business in a box, kind of.
And so you got that going. You used skills you developed through your side hustle. You got the specialism, I guess, in terms of this lead gen or website ranking.
I learned it. I learned it.
And what were the big things then that you realized that were a challenge?
I hated it.
You hated it.
That was the challenge. I was good at it and I hated it. So
it's a difficult combination.
Because I sat there and I was like, okay. And what I did is I leveraged, so communications, here we go again. I was writing all those papers in academia, we call them papers because you submit them to journals and hopefully they get published, and everywhere else, articles or blogs. But I had an extensive writing career in the university. And I realized that what I could do is, as I'm writing the copy for these websites that I was ranking, I can do this for other people too and make money. And I can make quick money because I can write fast and I'm very comfortable with the writing process. And so I did really well at it and realized, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be trading, my time for dollars. And, I also didn't really like the business model, but humans figure out what they like by bumping against what they don't like. You need to kind of hit those things you don't like first to then go, oh, this is really what I want, or this is what I really do like. So that's what was happening. I was doing well. Money's coming in. I was doing really well. And then I was like, oh my God, I hate this. I hate this. I do not like this at all.
I'm so glad you described it like that. I mean, how many people do you talk to, or how many of us talk to people that are in corporate careers, or even working for smaller organizations, so not necessarily running their own show, and they hate their job.
Yep.
They think, well, if only I could start my own company. If I worked for myself, it would be different. I'd be in control of my diary, all of these sorts of things.
Yep.
And the way you've just described it is, you had that control, you ran your own show, but you were still in that place where you didn't like that job.
I still hated it. And I was the one doing it. And you know what the interesting thing is once I started realizing how much I didn't like it, I look back at my days in the university, and the last 4 to 5 years, I didn't enjoy my job either. But because I had a master's degree, the job was one of the higher paid in the university because it required an advanced degree. You needed a master's degree to have that job. It was like they call them the golden handcuffs.
Yep.
I didn't want to leave because I was making such good money. And I was, in many ways, the job was easy, but it was very unfulfilling. I really, I didn't feel like I was making much of a difference. It was, but it took getting into that job where I built that business to realize how miserable I had been for so many years at the university. I didn't know that.
It's interesting comparing those, because in a way, the university forced your hand to say, well, you've got to make a change.
Right.
Now you're in a similar position where you're making money, the business is going well, but you're not enjoying it. What do? I
sold it. That's what I did.
Answer.
I was like, you know what? I can't see myself doing this for another year. I hate it. So I sold it, and to a profit of $300. Pretty impressive.
It's not bad. It's not bad. So you're only 29,700 down at this point.
But you know what? It was only 6 months old. There weren't a lot of assets, but I'm grateful that I pulled the business apart. I sold it to different people who were also involved in that group. They were very grateful. And then I was like, okay, what do I do now? And I came across a webinar about how you can become your own consultant, because this was that big, several years ago, or maybe still is, just become a consultant. It's okay if you don't know anything. and just, you know, and it was weird because this particular one was, he was telling you that you can set up an agency by running Facebook ads for clients. And when I went through his training, I realized this guy has no idea what he's doing with Facebook ads. So I'm not going to offer that service when I don't even know how to do it myself. So I took another course and I learned about running Facebook ads and marketing. And then I was like, oh, it was so exciting because this was several years ago. Obviously, video Facebook ads were just brand new, right? Nobody had done it. It was like the Wild West, and we were still using Power Editor, and like running Facebook ads back then took a fair bit of skill, which it still does if you want to run them well, but Facebook's done a lot to automate it and make it much easier for people to just run ads quickly.
In terms of the production and stuff like that, yeah.
Right. Back then, like Power Editor was a challenge to work with at times, and you really had to understand it. So I was now learning about marketing and psychology, and I was like, oh my God, this is so awesome. And I was in a particular Facebook group for this course I took, and literally they came knocking and said, like, Anita, we see you're so active in the community group. Do you want to manage it as our community manager? And I was like, I thought it was a joke, right? Whoever comes and says, because I hadn't even heard of this guy. And I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't for real. And then it turned out it was. They had been watching me for a while, and we're like, we need somebody to do this, you know, part-time. Would you be able to do it? And so I suddenly was running a Facebook ad agency.
Just like that.
Just like that. It was a little more work. It was exciting times. It was also very frustrating because I didn't know a lot about marketing. I didn't know a lot about sales. I didn't know a lot about the psychology. It was so exciting because it was so new, but at the same time, I found it very overwhelming. I'm taking more and more courses now. It almost felt like I was back in undergrad, course after course, because you no sooner would finish a course and then you go like, oh my God, well now there's like all these other things I don't know about that I should learn about to become better at marketing and sales. And so that time period, that's all it felt like, as I just went from course to course to course, book to book to book.
And were courses and books that the sort of only, ways you use to close those gaps or to address those skills gaps?
I did. So the books and the courses, and I'll say two things, not only the skills gaps, the other thing that taking those courses did, because they were all online, was it'll open me up to a community of other people who were similarly struggling. So we're all trying to learn the material, which was great because then we could support each other. And I didn't feel like, the only idiot in the room. It was like we were all in it trying to figure out, how do we put this with our business? How did you understand this particular thing that we're learning? And it started growing my network. So I had the two things. I'm building skills. Books didn't help me really understand the skills in the same way, and books didn't really help in the same way with networking. But the courses, those online courses, really did. And I'm forever grateful because I felt so alone. When you're running your own business, there's no boss telling you you're going to do this and you're going to do that. So it was also, at the same time, I'm growing into who I am as a business owner. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do I have to change now to become that way? And what ended up happening is, nobody really talks about this in the same way, is my 9-to-5 friends started disappearing out of my life because I couldn't relate to them. But I could relate to these folks in these online courses because they were just like me, trying to figure this out too.
Well, I think it's an important point you make about finding your community. And as you say, business owners and also people in very senior positions, I think sometimes do feel alone and don't know where to reach out to those support networks. You can speak to family, you can speak to friends, but I guess they're not in the same position. And it's about finding that community that can help you either give you the answers or help you arrive at the answers. And I think that's incredibly important. And I'm glad you drew that out.
Yeah, I would say it's the one thing that got me through those tough times, because you have so much going at hitting you, and you're trying this, and the money's not coming in, and now you got to pay more money. But at the same time, if you don't take this course, and you're not going to learn that skill that can make a big difference, and it's confusing. It was like, I look back at those times, and so as exciting as it is to move forward, people forget that every time you move forward, you leave something behind. So I left behind a lot of relationships during that period because I couldn't relate anymore. And that was painful. And we don't really talk about that. We talk about the entrepreneurial journey as if it's always just positive, or, you might have your struggles, but because this happened and this server crashed and whatever. But what about that emotional journey, which is massive, and trying to get people to believe in me? Right? So there's a saying I heard years ago, man, oh man, I wish I heeded it. Entrepreneurs tend to run out of one of two things, time or money. And I get that now. This took me way longer to start being successful than I ever thought it would take. Never thought it would take this long to finally hit a point where the business has become easy now, and the money's coming in, and it's not that really hard struggle like it was for those first few years as I was trying to figure out, what is it that I want to do? How do I want to serve?
Yeah, it's a good point in terms of helping you direct your focus, I guess, and thinking, well, I can exchange time for money, and that's what many of us do.
Right. In the beginning.
And but you can't exchange money for time.
No.
So it's quite important to, I think, realize that distinction and understand, given the time you have, what are the things you're going to be focusing on, what's important to you, and as you say, you talk about serving, what's going to help others.
Right. So I was always good at that. So I did the Facebook ad agency for a while, but again, with Facebook ads at that time, we were still using Power Editor. There was no, you couldn't cap your budgets like you can now. And I felt like I had a toddler in the house. So I was already raising two kids on my own. And then now I'm like, oh my God, my business is so same thing. Those same feelings I had with the lead gen business started coming up. And I was like, I don't like this. And I don't want to do it. And it just felt, the other thing is I felt very powerless because Facebook had the control. Working. Suddenly they changed something in the algorithm, and now you're scrambling again, trying to figure out what's going to work again. And I was just like, I don't have that capacity with two kids that I'm raising to also be babysitting this business. So I closed down the Facebook ad agency. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to go into digital marketing for coaches and consultants. So I created a course, beta tested it first, beta tested the course. People loved it, all of that. And then when I started launching the course, I realized that the pain was not bad enough, that these people wanted to do something about it. And I was like, I tried it for about, 8 months. Now money's running out fast. I'm hardly making sales. I'm like, now I'm sitting here going like, am I just an idiot? Like, I have 2 advanced degrees. And I like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I make this work? And that was the time when my business coach came into my life, and I'm forever grateful for her, because we talked at that very first time. And I said to her, like, this is a failing business. I don't know if I can resurrect it. And she looked at me and she said, maybe it's time to close it down. And as soon as I did, it was a massive relief off my shoulders.
And how do you said this business coach came into your life? Was it a conscious decision thinking, well, actually, I need someone that can help me here?
Yes, because I felt like, what is wrong with me? I have all this knowledge. I have all these skills. I know I can do this, but what is wrong that I can't seem to put the pieces together? And it turned out that I had pieces missing in my foundation, and I didn't know that. And that's why I was struggling so much. So she had a 12-week program, and every week we sat down and we went through the very specific things that I needed to look at. And she, through that laying of that strong foundation, the first couple of weeks, I didn't know what I was going to do, right, for a business. And then I started to I had, again, another side hustle on my full-time business now was I had a friend who was building an AI platform. And then I had another friend I was working with, and he and I were going to build a SaaS on her AI platform. That got me into SaaS. That got me into the world of churn. And if you're wondering what churn is, it's when a customer leaves, and it's a particularly strong metric that is followed by subscription-based businesses, because the more customers churn, the less profitable they become, the more likely the business is to fail. So like they're always looking at churn. And I realized, like, why don't I just work with churn for SaaS companies and take all of this qualitative feedback skills that I learned all those years of university and bring them all together. And it was like a huge, like, hand in glove, or however you want. It was like, in the Venn diagram, where you have the three overlapping circles and you have the middle, poof, that was it. And I was like, this is awesome. This is where I'm meant to be, because now I've taken all of those years of formal education and I can bring it forward. I have my passion, which is talking to people. And remember that whole sales part that I was always interested in, was selling the honey and talking to different people and helping to solve problems. And then the third is I'm passionate about it. And I really think that I can make a big impact in the world of customer experience. And so those three came together. The business now is just 14 months old. And it's like night and day to all the other businesses I had, where it was a grind because it wasn't a right fit. Now that I've hit the right fit, it's relatively, quote unquote, easy. Believe me, there's a lot of work I still do. At times it is grinding, but the grind is maybe 5%. The rest is I'm energized by what I'm doing. I'm excited because I know the market has a need for this, particularly SaaS companies do. I work with customer success. These people, I don't have to convince them of the value of what I do because they already know, they're already doing it. But much like when I hired my business coach, I had gaps. Well, they have gaps. I can bring in my expertise to help them. And then the biggest win is for the customers. The customers end up having a better experience out of what these companies are doing when they collect their feedback. And it's been amazing.
That's a great story, and I think I'm glad you brought up the work with a business coach again. So, you talked about the skills you developed and the formal education as well, your interests and your passions, and then said, okay, well, then there's these other bits here. These are the gaps that I had to close with this business coach. And I mean, just what sort of gaps were they? I mean, were they sort of key business skills? Were they hard business skills? Were they something more soft?
Yep. No, so they were all. So we went across all. Like, one of the first things we did was looked at my core values for my business. Like, what are my core values? And it was an exercise I had to do. I had to sit down and write out. I still have them here on my desk. 5 core values: empowering, respectful, connection, practical, and down to earth. Then we focused on branding out of those core values, right? Then we looked at, well, what am I going to do? What are my marketing channels I'm going to use? So I shut down Facebook, 100% on LinkedIn. Love it. Best decision I ever made with respect to my marketing channels. And then she brought up this concept, which I don't know if you know who Russell Brunson is. He does the
funnel.
Click funnels.
.com secrets.
.com secrets, traffic funnels, and there's another one, expert secrets. So one thing he talks about is this concept of the Dream 100. So my coach called it the core 100. But essentially, it's developing relationships with people who are much larger than I am and already have their authority and much larger audiences, much larger businesses, and developing relationships with them over time. So eventually, we can get to a point where we might be able to partner on things. And that, my friend, has moved me ahead light years.
That's a great piece of advice. And, it's not about being mercenary and reaching out and saying, hey, it's Gunter or Anita here, and I'd like to link in with you because I've got this really great candidate that can land in your company tomorrow. And so many people still do that and don't realize that it doesn't work.
Doesn't work. And I did it, embarrassingly. I did that because I
we
didn't
have
know
to
any
learn.
better. Right? Like I saw other people doing it, must work. Until I learned, and it was with her that I learned that no, I don't need to be that way. I don't need to do it. And it has opened doors. So there's one particular company, they're a software company, have about 25% market share around churn and subscription-based businesses. And I started this idea, reaching out slowly. I'll also give a hint, gifts like GIFTS, gifts, not GIF as in Giphies with
Moving,
the animated
yeah.
video. That's not what I'm saying. But highly personalized to them. And I have this one story. So again, I'm trying to figure out like who's who in this space. Who can I maybe start building relationships with? I had no idea who has like churn related blog posts or blogs or podcasts. Like I had no clue. And one of the things she forced me to do was I had to find 100 people to put on this list. From, like I said, people of influence, like pie in the sky, like, wow, if I could ever work with them, like these are the people that have like the biggest followings, the biggest names, right down to who has a blog that I could guest post on that has my audience, right? And I was hard. Can I tell you that was a really hard list to create? Because you get the first few, like the first 5 are easy. Oh, well, so-and-so's big. And so, but then it's getting down further and trying to decide, like, would it be worth my time to develop this relationship? And I thought I had like venture capitalists on my list. I had other businesses that do complementary stuff to mine. It was really hard to do.
It's that classic
So
sort of
worth it.
long tail challenge, thinking
It
about
is
how you're going to deal with those numbers.
long-term play. So anyway, let me get back to this one guy. He had done all the writing for all their content, and I sent him a gift, and it was small, and he was like really impressed with it. Okay, whatever. It was like really small. Then I sent him something that was highly personal to him. And he got back to me. I've still never spoken to him. This is 100% on LinkedIn. He gets back to me. He goes, "Hey, Anita, how would you like to write blogs and articles for us?" And I went, "Are you insane? 25% market share. Okay. And growing. They are very aggressive at what they're doing." And so I now have 2 articles, third one's in. And it's building my authority, because now I can put that on my website and say, hey, my articles are also seen here. And what that's doing is now I can leverage that into even bigger places. So yeah, it's been amazing.
And that's the return on your investment of
Yes.
building those 100 relationships. So not something overnight, but something that needs to be developed and something you need to nurture and work on. So I think that's a great piece of advice from obviously both from your business coach and from you putting it into action. So yeah.
Yeah. And I will just say this, if people are wondering, yes, people on the names on the list have changed as I've grown myself and realized like, oh, you know what? I thought these people were really key because back then I didn't really know what I was doing, but I've now focused a little more. So now these groups of people, like I don't do anything now with venture capitalists. Whereas initially I thought that would be a really key channel for me, but it's turned out not to be. So I've now changed names and put new and different people on for the direction I'm heading.
Yeah, I think it's important, to continue to kind of evolve that and change it as your circumstances change. And
it's not a static
so,
list. It's not a static list.
I mean, it's been such the way you've brought things together has been really, really fascinating. The things as you talk through the story and the bits fall into place. And I think now, as you describe it, you found your niche. You used the example of the Venn diagrams coming together, and it sounds a bit cheesy, but the way you articulated it is brilliant. So I'm really glad it sort of culminated on this point. So I mean, I guess before we kind of close off with a few short questions, I mean, what advice would you, the one thing I drew out of particular interest was around values. And what advice would you give to listeners who are, I guess, struggling to reconcile values differences? So perhaps theirs versus working at a corporate
Right.
or an employer, and they don't quite align.
I think the biggest thing, and I'm in this right now, like right this minute, when we get off this call, in 25 minutes, I'm getting back on my call with a business coach, my same business coach, because we're done now, like our formal work, but her and I still keep up, and I still pay her to help me because I need it. She has the expertise. And I really want to niche down to like just one thing that I do, and that's around customer feedback. And I've been really afraid to do it because I always hear you hear it, oh, niche down. But then there's that fear of, well, if I niche too far, will I niche myself right out of a job? No one will find me relevant. And same with the values thing. You really need to ask yourself, like, we only have this one life to live. There's no do-overs, at least as not in this reality. What do I really want? And does this make me happy? Am I getting real pleasure and joy out of this? Or when I think about that, like if I think about my job and I go, oh, and that is the primary feeling, then my friend, maybe it's time to start looking to move on. And the interesting thing is, the more I sit like I do right now, I already know the direction I'm heading. Yes, it will be fully into customer feedback, but I just want to hear my business coach confirm it. The more I can get into what brings me joy and makes me happy when I think about it, doors just open. It becomes like, it's so weird, but I become energized. Then that energy just makes everything easier. So like, I think of my job at the university. When I didn't enjoy being there, it was a drudgery. Like I tried to make myself and the environment happy, but that was the whole point. I was trying to influence change. But the more that I've sat and gone, what do I like? What really brings me pleasure? What really makes me feel so fulfilled? Like, I was just sending a message to someone who works 9 to 5, and he goes, why are you working on the weekend? And I said, because I love it. It's not really work. Like, there are pieces I'm not so fond of, but those are tiny. Like, that's maybe like 5%, 95%. Like, oh my God, if I didn't get paid doing this, I'd still want to do it because I enjoy it so much. And I can't believe I would ever say that, because that was never how it was. But the more that I listen to that still inner voice, and it does mean taking time sometimes. It means shutting down social media and all of that and sitting with your piece of paper or your phone and asking yourself that hard question. What do I really want? What truly brings me joy? What is that Marie Kondo, does it sing to you or speak to you or whatever? Does it bring you joy? Literally, it's the same thing. When you think about those things, does it bring you joy, or is the primary feeling you're having one of dread or heaviness or regret? If those are the primary feelings you're having, then the values aren't aligned, and it's time to move on, because you only have this one life to live. And we've heard it, people on their deathbed. You don't want to be one of those people who said, hey, I wish I would have when I could have, and regret, because you can't go back and undo. But what you can do is open your heart, ask yourself what you really want, move forward toward that. And believe me, the path starts opening up in front of you. You might still be scared. I'm scared. I'm very scared to do this. But now the flip side of fear is excitement. So now I'm telling myself, maybe it's not really fear. Maybe I'm excited. I'm excited to do this.
That's a great approach to take, because your brain will do what it thinks you want it to do. So if you say I'm really nervous about giving this presentation, you're going to not feel well. But if you just twist that slightly and say I'm really excited about this,
yeah, I'm excited.
And there's so many ways you can use that approach. And I particularly like the way you've talked about identifying or finding what it is you love. And this is so often the case in call it normal employment, where an employee is unhappy and they want to leave, and I'll give you more money, and
Right.
they'll say, okay, that's
Okay,
fine,
yeah.
all right. But that only goes so far. It'll last a couple of months, maybe 6 months, and the thing that makes them unhappy is still there.
Right.
And as you articulated through all of your career experiences, the money was there, but that
Always.
thing that was making you, or should be making you happy, wasn't, and that's what caused you to kind of pivot each time. So I think that's fantastic advice. Thank you.
Yeah. So I hope this helps, whoever's listening. Hey, listen, first of all, you're not alone. Second of all, we're all scared and we don't all have the answers, and that's okay. The bigger thing again is sitting with yourself and being truly honest and saying, if I could, so if money is the issue, set it aside and pretend you have all the money in the world. What would you do?
Yeah.
What would really make your heart sing? And I agree. So I don't agree that, you should just follow your passion because there's also got to be a market to pay for it too. But you need to find that intersection of your passion, that it's exciting. How can you bring it a little differently with people who are willing to pay? Because I was passionate about digital marketing too, but they weren't willing to pay me.
Yeah, it's the classic old Venn diagram again.
It is.
So great advice. That's been really super. Thanks so much for sharing your story. And I guess just before we end, a couple of short questions. Is there any particular book that you'd recommend to readers to pick up, one or two of your favorite books?
Okay, so no laughing. Oh, actually, go ahead and laugh. Oh, I forgot this is a podcast. Gunten and I are looking at each other here on video. I was going to yank it out. Okay, so seriously, favorite business book of all time. He has written over 60 books. I can guarantee you've probably read one of his books in your life. And it's called Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss, brilliant.
And every time I say that to people, I can 99.9% guarantee you do not have this book as one of your best business books.
That is certainly unique. I think it needs to be an addition to mine. So brilliant. Thank you for that.
It is awesome. Essentially, it tells this story. The story we just talked about. This is what it tells. So that is my top recommend.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And finally, listeners, where can they go to connect with you or find out more about you and your work?
Yeah. So 2 places, Anita Toth, TOTH.ca. So that is really if you're around, customer retention, customer feedback. So there's a little section that says how I can help you. If you click on that, I have foundational guides. And one of the guides in particular is called The Ultimate Guide to Customer Feedback. And it really lays out how you collect feedback, why it's important. And there's a compendium that goes along with it that gives you questions to ask, because that sort of, I call that the comprehensive guide to customer feedback questions, right from product market fit to cancellation surveys to understanding who your ideal customers are and the types of questions you should be asking. And then lastly, find me on LinkedIn, Anita Toth. I have the bright orange shirt. So you'll find me over there, and feel free to reach out and connect with me. That's really my primary channel. So if you're looking for resources, go to the website under how I can help you. And otherwise, if you want to get to know me a little better, LinkedIn is the place.
That's brilliant. And thanks for the offer, to connect with listeners. I will post the links to both your websites and resources and LinkedIn in the show notes. So
Awesome.
People can find that easily. And yeah, just again, thank you so much for sharing your story and your insight. It's been another great story to have on the podcast. And I'm really grateful for your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it.
Wow, it really is amazing when you sit down and look back on a career and you find all of these gems and all these nuggets that come out in conversation. And I really am so grateful to Anita for spending some time on the show and sharing those insights and those nuggets of wisdom and experience with us. I've certainly enjoyed the chat, and I've pulled out so many bits of value from that. As always, I just like to cover off a bit of those before we end off the show. I've also written those up in the show notes, so they'll be there for you to read through. But I think the key things that stood out for me were mentorship. So this is something that Anita spoke about as being so valuable to her when she made that transition from, I suppose, studying or learning, so sort of pre-working environment into the working environment. A mentor was invaluable in helping her make that transition, and the fact that 20 years later they're still in touch and have a great relationship. So yeah, mentorship is important. The importance of communication skills, written and verbal. Now, regardless of the industry that you're in, these skills can go so far with you, and they can serve you in all aspects of your life, whatever it is you choose from a career perspective. And as I say, regardless of the career you choose, these are really valuable skills to keep developing and use on a daily basis. Project management was an interesting one because it's come up a few times, and it comes up in the context of people being project managers, obviously, and these skills are important. But in many aspects, people aren't project managers, but they find these project management skills really important and really helpful. So develop those skills and use them when you need them. Anita talked about clarity, being clear what you're looking for. And she mentioned a few sort of, I suppose, I don't want to say cul-de-sacs, but she'd kind of gone a little bit with a bit of her career when she left the university, found out she didn't enjoy it, and had to sort of pivot or look for something else. So try and be clear on what you're looking for and try and do something that brings you happiness and joy. I'm so glad Anita brought up the topic of side hustles. So again, while these sorts of things are fun, they're great, they can be hobbies. Although once they start generating money, I suppose they become more of a side hustle. But they really do teach you skills that you might not learn in your everyday job. So you might not get an opportunity to use certain approaches or tools or a certain set of skills. And doing a side hustle really gives you the ability to do that. And it allows you to do that at a low risk as well, because you're not giving up your day job, so you can, for a fairly low amount, invest in a side hustle, develop the side hustle and develop your skills as well. Spending time with people was another one that came out, and Anita spoke about the 100 challenge, the Dream 100 by Russell Brunson, around finding 100 people and really growing a relationship with them. And so yeah, it just goes to show the value of relationships. And when you get down to the bottom of everything, it's about people. So again, excellent skills to develop. And also Anita talked about the strength or the importance of finding your community and growing your network. And this is important because it helps you understand, I guess, what that broader community looks like. It's a sounding board. It helps you understand yourself better, your career. Really just important to find your community and find a place that's safe, I suppose, that you can discuss ideas with, share problems with. Anita also spoke about core values, and again, very important. Developing those will help you make tough decisions. They'll help you align your interests to jobs available and those sorts of things. So again, core values are very important to deliver. We've spoken about a mentor, but Anita also spoke about a business coach. And again, really coaching is such a powerful tool. If you find there's a gap, or if there's a gap and you don't know what that gap is, a coach is a great way to help you through that. I have done an episode on coaching, so feel free to look through the archives or listen to the archives. There is a bit on coaching there. And I think ultimately, and we've spoken a bit about this before in the summary, do what makes you happy. Anita said, do what makes you happy, do what brings you joy. And it's really about finding that niche, about finding things that make you happy, things you can do well, and things that people will pay money for, whether it's your own business or an employer. Bringing those three together and finding the intersection of those circles is really where it's at. So that was it in summary. Another really awesome episode. Thanks again to Anita, and thanks again to you, the listeners, for giving up your time to listen to the show. I really do appreciate it. Please get in touch and let me know more about what you want to hear on the show. If there's any topics or anything that are bothering you, sorts of challenges you're trying to overcome, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a review for the show if it's available on the platform you listen to. The show is available on all the major platforms. So I look forward to talking to you again in the next episode. Do take care of yourselves and chat soon. Bye-bye.